Hey everybody, my name is Eric Hayden. I'm the Warning Coordination Meteorologist for the National Weather Service out of Newport, North Carolina. We cover the eastern third of North Carolina. As the Coordination Meteorologist, my job is really the liaison between you, the general public, the community, and the Weather Service. In this quick video, we want to go over the 2018 Hurricane Outlook. It came out from the National Hurricane Center in late May. We want to go over what the forecast says, what it doesn't say, and briefly hit on some of the impacts across eastern North Carolina that are possible from any landfalling hurricane.
Anytime we talk about seasonal forecasts with hurricanes, we really like to emphasize it only takes one storm. And what we mean by that is it doesn't matter too much if it was an active or weak year in terms of total number across the country. If we get just one big storm in eastern North Carolina, we're going to remember it. A good example of that is 1992 on average in terms of how many storms we had that year, not a lot. But Hurricane Andrew hit South Florida. So if you lived in South Florida that year, that was a huge year for you. So again, the point of emphasis with that is it only takes one storm to make it an active year where you live. The climatology for tropical weather and hurricanes really peaks the middle part of September, and that's because that's when the ocean water is at its warmest. Here in eastern North Carolina, however, we've had storms as early as May, so even though hurricane season officially begins June 1st, we've had storms very early in the season, and then even as waters have cooled off into the fall months, we've had Hurricane Matthew and Sandy. So we can really get storms here any time of the year, roughly from May 1st on, and the traditional peak coincides with the middle of September with the warmer waters of the ocean. Now, here's the official hurricane outlook for 2018 as of late May from the National Hurricane Center. A 40% chance for a near normal season and a 35% chance for an above normal season. That would translate to the possibility of 10 to 16 named storms, 5 to 9 of which would become hurricanes, and the possibility of 1 to 4 major hurricanes. Anytime we have your attention when we're talking hurricanes, we would like to really emphasize a few points. Number one, let's talk about the forecast cone, and let's also talk about the impacts. First, the forecast cone. This represents the most probable path for the center, just the center of the storm, about 2/3 of the time. The Hurricane Center has done an excellent job through the years. This is actually based on the past 5 years of error. So you may notice that track and forecast cone has actually gotten more narrow through the years. So 2/3 of the time, the center should pass within that path or forecast cone itself. But this does not show the impacts, what they could be, and keep in mind that impacts occur well away from the center. So this map is only intended to show you the most probable path for just the center of the storm. A good example of that is Hurricane Matthew. If you don't remember, a couple years ago in 2014, Matthew tracked along the coastline of Florida and then parallel to the South Carolina shoreline and then out to sea. The center itself never crossed into North Carolina, but we certainly had impacts. Very, very heavy rain inland and some severe flooding. This slide is made to emphasize with you that, again, the forecast cone just shows the center, but impacts can occur well away from it. Just think about what happened with Hurricane Matthew. The other point of emphasis is the impacts that can occur with any tropical cyclone. A lot of focus is placed on the wind only, but you can have, in addition to wind, storm surge, heavy rainfall and flooding, tornadoes, and rip currents. So even with a depression or a tropical storm, you can have some of these impacts. So as you pay attention to any forecasts this summer with the approach of a tropical system, focus on the impacts, not just the wind or category. Speaking of that, you are probably familiar with this. The Saffir-Simpson Scale, Category 1 storm would be weaker than a Category 5. But that's just based on wind. This is how we determine how strong the storm is, just based on wind alone. Does not say anything about rainfall. Doesn't say anything about how slow or fast moving the storm is. How large is it? Is it hitting at high tide? Have we already had a lot of heavy rain? The category is only focused on wind. It's only part of the puzzle, so don't just focus on the category itself. A good example on that is Hurricane Arthur. We're going to compare this to Irene. This is back in a couple years ago. Hurricane Arthur hit as a Category 2 by Cape Lookout. We did have some storm surge along the Outer Banks and some gusty winds, but it was a smaller storm and fast moving. This is a map of wind speeds. So most of the wind was confined to the coastline of the Outer Banks and the far eastern part of our area. Outside of these areas, the impacts were not large because it wasn't a big storm and it was fast moving. And again, it was a Category 2 storm. Do you remember Irene? That was in 2011. Irene was just a 1. Just a 1. But it was a slow-moving storm, much larger. It also hit near Cape Lookout, so roughly the same location as Arthur. We had impacts along the Outer Banks, but since it was a larger, slower-moving storm, this is a map of wind speeds. We had winds between 50, 60, even 70 miles per hour over toward Greenville and inland areas, so much larger impact. In addition, since it was moving slower, we had some heavy rain, 10 to 15 inches of rain and flooding inland. So again, Irene was just a 1, Arthur was a 2, but we had bigger impacts from Irene because it was slower moving and it was larger. Our emphasis is don't just focus on the category, focus on the impacts you can have from any given storm. To continue to highlight that, to focus on the impacts, almost 50% of deaths that we've had with tropical systems are related to storm surge. And when you add inland flooding, 80%, over 80% of deaths are due to water. And if you look very carefully, you can see less than 10% are related to wind. It's not to say to ignore the wind, it's not to say to ignore the category, but don't just focus on the category, focus on the wind and especially the water. Here's an example from Hurricane Matthew near Hookerton, flooded roadway. Our big campaign is Turn Around, Don't Drown. Not only do you not know how deep the water is or how fast it's moving, you don't know if the road is still there. So if you see flooded roads, not just during hurricanes or tropical systems, anytime, turn around, don't drown. Please do not drive around barricades and cross the water. Want to remind you, you can get weather briefings on our website. Just go to weather.gov/MHX. Really, if you're watching us all across the country, if you go to your local weather forecast office by just clicking on weather.gov and scroll to the bottom of the page, you should be able to find your local briefing during significant weather. Lastly, if you are an organization watching us, a local school group, church, library, you are able to sign up for our Weather Ready Nation Ambassador Program. This is all across the country. All the local offices do this, helping us to make us more resilient to increasing weather and changes across our area. It's a good way to connect with us. You can get weather preparedness information throughout the year, social media plans for your Facebook or Twitter page or website. It's free and you determine how involved you want to be. All we ask is, as you sign up, pass on our information to your employees, to your organizations. This is just a list of some of the ambassadors that have signed up across our local area, and you'll notice ranges from community college to fire and rescue to the Rose Society across eastern North Carolina. If you're an organization, you're allowed to sign up. To do so, you can go to our website, weather.gov/MHX/WRN, or if you just go to the website itself and scroll down to the ambassador link, that's an easy way to sign up. If you have more questions on this presentation or the ambassador program, please email me. It's eric.hayden, H-E-D-E-N, @noaa.gov. And thank you very much for watching this presentation. Please share this information with others.